Hello everyone, my name is Oren and I'm the head of the Scientific Computing Lab at the Nuclear Research Center Negev and the last year computer science doctoral student at the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. As all of you already know, in recent years there has been a growing trend in using computer vision and deep learning methods for solving different problems. This technology has been proven to be very successful in many fields, and one of them is also the natural sciences. An example for this application is the investigation of hydrodynamic instabilities, which is our topic for today. But first, let us give a brief introduction to the Rayleigh-Taylor hydrodynamic instability. The Rayleigh-Taylor instability, or RTI, occurs when a dense fluid is on top of some lighter fluid. Given some initial perturbation, the instability starts to grow, and in the early phase, it acts as the equation marked in blue. As one can see, the four most important factors are the Atwood number A, the gravity G, the time T, and the wave number K, which is practically the wavelength lambda. An example of RTI is the well-known experiment conducted by Waddell et al. In 2001. One way to study RTI is through experiments with images. However, these experiments don't always give us the whole picture we need, since there are some experiments that are too short for cameras to record properly. In order to fill in the missing time frames, with a less pricey experiment, computer simulation are used. However, due to unknown initial conditions, numerical errors, and more, it is not an easy task to reproduce the experiment. Of course, one can perform many simulations with different initial conditions and compare the results to the experiment. A way to bridge this gap between experiments and simulations is with computer vision and deep learning, or CVDL. But before we will try to bridge the gap, we need to define exactly what problems we tend to solve. So the first, given an input image from an experiment or simulation, sort the database according to a similarity score. The second, given an input image for an experiment or simulation, extract the initial parameters of the most similar image. The third, given a partial template from an experiment or simulation, sort the database according to a similarity score. And the last one, given a set of images that represent the growth of the phenomena, predict the non-existing time steps. In order to solve the four problems, we first created a database named Rayleigh that will contain the simulation images along with Waddell's 2001 experimental images. Rayleigh contains approximately 130,000 images, while each image was produced by simulating RTI via the hydrodynamic code DAFNA. We made the database publicly available and sorted it such that the name of each image contains its initial parameters. So far, scientists were responsible for deciding by how much the simulation is close to the actual experiment. However, for an automated CVDL procedure, we need to define an alternative measure of how close the simulation is to the experiment. The alternative measure, which we named physical loss, measures how physically meaningful the results of each technique are. It is actually a quality of loss function that tells us how the parameters of the output image are close to the input parameters. In our work, the physical loss is the relative error marked in blue. We know that the most significant parameters are the Atwood number and the time. We will now present a possible way to solve the first task, which is sorting the database according to a similarity score. To do so, we tested two different algorithms. The first, LIR, which is a classical computer vision-based suite. The second is Infogun, which is a deep learning technique. We first present LIR. LIR is a Java library that provides a straightforward way to extract the most similar images. Its similarity score is based on color, texture, shapes, and objects. It is notable that it is a classical computer vision approach that has no learning capabilities. To have a broader understanding of Lear performance, we gave it a random simulation image as an input. We then gathered the 2,000 first images and evaluated their physical loss on the Atwood number. We repeated this process 13,000 times and averaged the results. On the graph, we can see two trends. The red trend is the physical loss, and the blue trend is the ordered Lear scores. As one can see, the average physical loss of the first 200 images is 0.5. This means that if the Atwood number is 0.1, Lear gives us Atwood of 0.15. We will later compare the performances of Lear against Infogun. We now present our second image retrieval method based on neural networks, Infogun. GAN stands for Generative Adversarial Network, and it is a framework capable of learning two neural networks. The first is a generator network G that transforms noise variables into a generated sample. The second is a discriminator network D, which targets to distinguish between real samples with generated ones. This creates a fruitful competition of both G and D that allows G to generate samples such that D will have difficulty with distinguishing real samples from them. Now that we more or less understood how Infogun works, let's talk about the results of Infogun and also compare it to Lear's results. If we look at the top graph, which is the physical loss of the Atwood number on the same 13K input images using Infogun, we can see that the physical loss score is lower and better than Lear's. Another important aspect is the width of the physical loss trend. As the red trend is thinner, there is less noise, and therefore the results have more physical sense. As one can notice, the red trend of Infogun is thinner than the red one of Lear. This means that Infogun outperforms Lear's because of its learning capabilities. Now let's talk about the second task. Given an image, extract the initial parameters. We attempt to solve this problem with an ad hoc convolutional neural network, which we named PREG. In short, PREG gets an image from a simulation or an experiment as an input and returns an estimation of their initial parameters, which in our case are the Atwood and time parameters. In the table on the left corner, we can see an input image with Atwood of 0.34 and time of 0.37. The rest of the table is the top images returned from PREG, and by top images I mean the images with the top scores PREG returned. As one can see, PREG returns very similar images and parameters that are very close to the input initial parameters. Of course, the results we just saw are of one image, but is it consistent with more than just one? To prove it is, we tested PREG by predicting the Atwood and time parameters on 2,000 random images. The graphs evaluate PREG using physical loss. As one can see, the results are excellent, as the physical loss almost converges with the PREG score. Thus, PREG explains the variance of Atwood and time very well. Therefore, the results of PREG are physically meaningful. Now, we move on to address this third task. Given a partial template, sort the database. It is important since sometimes there is a significant information in a small portion of the image that shows up in other images. We use quality-aware template matching, or QATM for short, for this task. QATM learns the similarity scores, reflecting the soft repeatedness of a pattern. Empirically speaking, matching a backward pouch in QATM will produce a much lower score than matching a foreground patch. In order to evaluate QATM performance on a certain template image, we ordered the resulting match template in accordance with the QATM scores. Then we used PCA to reduce the dimensionality of the data, and then used the K-means algorithm for clustering the data. The colors represent the clustering class of each sample, while dots above the graph represent the mean and the median of each class. In the top graph, which considers the most unique input template, most of the first results are clustered in one cluster. This shows that the algorithm understood the template successfully and found lots of significant similar subfigures. In the other less unique templates, the results are less good, and there is mixture in the colors of the cluster dots. Finally, we conclude with the time series prediction task. As a reminder, the problem is, given a set of images that represent the time growth of the instability, produce the missing images using a prediction algorithm. PROD-RNN is a state-of-the-art recurrent neural network for prediction of time series images and based on convolutional long short-term memory networks that try to predict future images by past ones. These are the results of the prediction of PROD-RNN. The top image contains the experiment images of waddles, while the bottom image is of random simulation. If we look at each of those, the top frame are the real images, and the bottom frames are the predictive images produced by PROD-RNN. As one can see, the results produced by PROD-RNN, although blurry, are excellent and very close to the real images. We will now present our future plans and conclude our work. So first, we presented what the Rayleigh-Taylor instability is. Secondly, we presented the importance of simulations and showed that there is a gap between simulations and physical experiments. We then defined 4 key problems that we tend to solve via CVDL, together with a novel evaluation methodology named physical loss. Finally, we presented the different CVDL techniques that solve each one of these 4 problems and show its results with the new methodology. In order to test these techniques, we prepared a publicly available RTI database. We suggest, as a future work, to investigate parameters that are not included in the initial parameters of the model. Also, testing the same CVDL techniques presented in other experiments and instabilities would be recommended. Furthermore, as PRX training is too long, it would be great to have an unmodeled parameter regression. Finally, explainable AI methodology should be performed. That's it. I was Oren. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.